Well, Zach, tis the season for New Year's resolutions. So I feel like I need to ask you, did you make any New Year's resolutions this year?
Gabe, I have made so many that I simply don't have time on this podcast to go through and list every single one. Is that enough of an excuse?
Yes, that's totally an excuse. I don't make New Year's resolutions either, so don't feel bad. I think that's what you're just trying to tell us, but that's fine.
Well, it's funny because one thing I was just telling you before this podcast was some upcoming hiking trips, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, you might have noticed that my word of the year, when asked by our colleague David Brown, was ascend. So I'm going to try to keep that theme going as much as I can. So maybe my resolution is to do more hiking trips, although I don't know if I can top what I've already done. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm going to roll with that.
I did actually, I did actually sort of set myself a goal yesterday, and it relates to hiking as well. So I'll tie it in nicely to what you just said. I loved your word, by the way. Ascend was a great word. I think that's rather than doing New Year's resolutions, doing a word of the year, I think is super fun.
Yeah,
And I liked yours a lot.
you know me. I hate resolutions. I think most people do. I see it as like a negative thing, and I think it's because the vibe with New Year resolutions and failing your resolutions has become
Agreed.
so popular. But the word of the year, ascend. I mentioned in that comment, not just related to my hiking trips, but things we do every day in our careers or with our businesses as well, moving up. Gabe, I think you picked, was it bold or was
I
there
picked
something?
bold, yes.
And
And the
that one
reason
surprised me because I feel like you're often pretty bold to begin with.
really? Oh, okay. See, I feel like I beat around the bush about things sometimes. So maybe I'm not self-aware enough to realize that I maybe need to stop being as bold. No, I feel like with bold, the reason I picked that one is I do feel like I oftentimes meter my words and meter the way that I say things because I don't want to offend. I am very much a people pleaser and I don't want to upset people. And so I find that I often will not say things that, as direct as I should. And so I'm just trying to that's my kind of goal to work on this year is to just be more bold and be more direct about the things that I'm saying. And I think it aligns really nicely to the podcast too. There are times where I meter my words a bit here just because I don't want to offend. And I'm still not trying to offend people, but I feel like we need to be a bit more bold in some of the things that we're talking about because there are some big changes and challenges that are coming for our industry. And I think it's up to us to be a bit more bold around how we help people hopefully navigate some of these changes.
I agree. We provide a lot of advice on this podcast, and I think acting on that advice and being more bold, Gabe, to your point, is going to help you ascend. So now that we have that out of the way, Gabe, we have a big episode today. And again, I say that every time, but this is the first episode of 2025. So season
It is.
5 of the Buffering podcast, as it is now known. But I think we have some great topics lined up.
Yeah, I'm excited about the conversation today. And Zach, that was we were doing some prep work for this, everybody right now is talking about, new year, new you, and, all of these things that you should be doing as you move into the new year. And we wanted to kind of bounce off of that theme, but doing it less so in a resolution way or in a what are the things that you can, make this year the best year yet kind of stuff. And more just focus on what are some really tactical, practical things that you can do at this point in the year to set your business up for success in 2025 and really help drive yourself forward in 2025 as well. So that's really what we wanted to focus on today.
I was getting a little nervous there. I thought you were going to ask our listeners to set a business resolution right after we
No,
just went
I'm
on
not
this
doing that.
this side track of talking about how these resolutions are not good. But I think you're spot on there, Gabe. What can we do better in 2025 that we did in 2024, or even the be bold approach? What can we do in 2025 that we haven't done before? I think a lot of great topics we can discuss on this.
Yeah, I think it is important to look back on what has worked well. As again, I'm not a resolution guy, but I do try and sit down and set some goals for myself for the new year, whether they be personal or business related goals or whatever. And usually when I'm sitting down to do that, it's, well, what were the things that I said at the beginning of the prior year? How did I do to achieve those? And, what are the new things that I want to modify as I'm moving forward? And it does become important to kind of have that as a baseline and as a jumping off point for what you want to do in this case in the new year.
I think you're spot on, Gabe. I think let's jump right into it. And
Yeah,
I
let's do
know
it.
Gabe, you really like talking about data, and
I
I'm
love
not
this
throwing you under the
conversation.
bus, because if anyone else loves talking about data, it's of course me. But digging into data is a great way to start out the new year, I think. Right? Is that the nerdiest thing I could have said today?
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know. There's anything that could have been nerdier. That was definitely a nerdy way to start the conversation. But I'm 100% with you, man. And I was thinking about this just again, kind of thinking about these tactical, practical things that we could do and we could talk to people about. And where I really wanted to start the conversation around this is, digging into that data to start the year off right, figuring out where those opportunities lie. I I don't want to like pat myself on the back here too much, so I'll try not to be too blowhardy here. But I do think one of the things that I do really well, and it's just the career that I've had and the experiences that I've had that have allowed me to do this. I'm really good at looking at data and figuring out where the opportunities lie.
This should surprise no one, by the way. Like this, like pat yourself on the back as much as you
All
need
right,
to
I'll give
here.
myself a little pat on the back for that one. No, it's just again, I've had a very unique career, and I'm very good at this. I'm very good at looking at data and trying and identifying the opportunities that exist within that data. And so, if anybody wants to talk about this about their own business, feel free to hit me up. I'm always happy to have these conversations. But for broadband service providers specifically, what I wanted to talk about here, Zach, is generally, for the most part, broadband service providers have this big base of subscribers that they don't talk to nearly enough, that they don't have conversations with. And I cannot tell you how many times in the last year or in the many years before that, I've heard some version of leaders at broadband service providers saying, we don't want to bother our customers. They're happy with the services that they have. If they wanted more services from us, they'd be picking up the phone and calling us and asking us for these things. That's not how it works. You're not bothering them. It's about educating them. And it's about educating them about potentially the new offers and new solutions that you have. And we'll talk about, new services and things like that as well. But I was reading this, oh God, I don't even know what I want to call it, that dissertation that you sent to me, that Accenture report. And it was really interesting. It was this very detailed report about kind of trends for 2025 and things to think about and how consumer behavior was changing. One of the things that really jumped out to me in that report was it said 68% of people would engage more with a brand that educates them. And so there's a great opportunity for broadband service providers specifically, I believe, to educate their customers, not only about the new services that you're potentially bringing to market, but just about technology in general. And again, it's just a great opportunity to step in and kind of fill that gap.
Gabe, it reminds me of an email, and we're in the broadband space, so this is, of course, going to be a very broadband heavy example. But every week I get an email from my broadband provider, and it talks about the experience that I'm having in my home. It talks about the threats that are being blocked, talks about the connected devices. I've never hit any service limit hits, so personally that one doesn't impact me. But it's a great way to educate me. And one of the things I love, and I shared this example with you a few weeks ago, if you recall, is for the features I'm not using, it has a very nice call to action that's basically saying like, hey, you're paying for this. Why don't you use it? And you can click on it. It'll take you right into their app, and then I can start using their features. Now, of course, the downside on this was it was like a parental controls feature. So had they known a little bit more about my ultra connected home, which I want to talk more about on LinkedIn this week, so keep an eye out for that, they would have known that, maybe there's a reason I'm not using that specific feature, and they could have
Mm-hmm.
personalized that messaging. But the reason I bring this up, it's because, yeah, I'm a pretty happy customer, but Gabe, to your point, we don't want to bother our customers. I like seeing this information. It kind of keeps me in the loop, keeps the BSP in my mind as well. I haven't forgotten about them. And then to your point of the BSPs, um, again, not wanting to bother their customers, but we always talk about what you can do to retain your existing customers and keep
Mm-hmm.
them in the loop, as opposed to going out and acquiring new customers. The cost difference with that alone. And I think, again, it's just part of a broader education and retention campaign. We don't want to be forgotten about, right? I just said my BSP emails me weekly. I don't think it's too much. I'm happy with it. Every Sunday, I look forward to seeing what happened with my internet experience this past week. And I think it's just a
Well,
great way
because they're
to use the data
providing
you have.
Yeah, but they're providing you information and insight into how you're using the service. So when we think about bothering a consumer, right? If you're just bombarding them with information that's completely worthless and useless, then yeah, eventually maybe eventually that consumer is going to get tired of that. But if you're providing actual information and insight, that's something that is going to be seen as a real positive by the consumer. And look at the data, right? If you send a bunch of emails and all of a sudden, and if you're sending too many emails and people stop opening them and clicking on them, then stop sending so many emails. But this assumption that our customers don't want to hear from us, I think, is a really dangerous one, because you're potentially leaving a huge opportunity on the table of not communicating with your customers in a really effective way.
I think a non-broadband example, Gabe. I'm going to mention Apple, and I mention Apple not because we love Apple so much, but it's because it's a company we all most of us interact with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
But when they come out with new health features, it's the hearing aids on the new AirPod Pros, or the Apple Watch ECG, or the oxygen levels on the Apple Watch. They do these big education pushes around those, and I feel like I know more about like these different areas of health now from Apple's education campaigns. But going back to your statistic there, 68% of people would engage with a brand that educates them. Of course, now when I think of these things, or when I think of Apple or their newest products, I'm all about engaging with them because of their education campaigns, whether it's on their product, some of the new health services and features on their products. But again, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a great non-broadband example as well.
Yep, I think that's a great one. I know you had another bullet here, Zach, around collaborating with customers as well. You wanted to dive into that one a
Yeah,
bit?
I told you about this, Gabe, and I said this might be a hot take, but and like it's gonna be
Hey,
good.
let's be bold, buddy. We
Yeah,
you
I
can
was gonna say,
adopt my
it's
word
gonna
as
be good
well.
when I say something might be a hot take, because someone's rolling their eyes right now, like, oh, what's he about to say about Thanksgiving food? But no. In the past, Gabe, we've always talked about use influencers in your community, in your marketing. People love that, right? And I think I want to change that this year. I want to say, collaborate with your customers and not just the influencers. And what I'm thinking of here is, really investing into your community, the relationships you have with perhaps your more loyal customers, or people who have engaged with you, people who have engaged with your products. I think you could likely call these people influencers, but I just like the phrase collaborate with your customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great term and a great way to think about it. And leveraging, you can also use them almost like, whether it's a focus group or, more of a digital focus group, right? Where you're reaching out to them, you're trying out some of these ideas. If you have this idea, like Zach was talking about, of, communicating out more directly with your customers, if you have this loyal set of followers, start to send some of this information to them, see how they're interacting, get their feedback, and then start to roll it out more broadly across your entire subscriber base based on that feedback.
Exactly. Even if you're launching a new, broadband experience, I think there's a great way to test this. And again, collaborate with your customers. If my broadband provider reached out to me today and it's like, hey, if you're part of a connected household and you want to try this new package from us, blah blah blah, I would like sign up, zero hesitations. Like
Mm-hmm.
and I'm already about to call them and be like, hey, do you have anything
Any new
focused
things you
on?
guys are working on?
Yeah, like you need help with anything? I've got time. But no, I think collaborating with your customers, not just on, when we talk about marketing, I think a lot of people think of like the marketing campaign, the email, the push notification. But like I said a couple episodes ago, marketing is in every area of your business. So again, collaborate with your customers, take that feedback seriously, test. We always talk about testing, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there to stop making some of these assumptions that we don't want to bother our customers, or they don't want to hear from us. But again, stop these assumptions, and work directly with your customers on some of these initiatives.
Yep. I meant to mention this when you were talking Apple earlier, and I just want to circle back and close off this topic with this comment. Do you have the notifications from Apple turned on around screen time, and how much time you've spent on your screen?
Oh, you better believe I had to turn those off.
Oh, you did? Oh
Well, this
man,
this goes to
I
a
love
statistic.
those reports. I think they're fascinating.
I just don't want to see like how much time. It's not me tuning out Apple's message, but
Uh-huh.
I just pulled out my phone. So like for the people who are watching us on our video podcast, they're probably wondering what's going on here. But I've got to pull up my screen time now, Gabe. But I do want to hear about your notifications.
I love that notification. It comes through. I think it's like Sunday morning, right? And it pops through. And usually I can tell what I've been doing that week based on what my notifications are. Like when I travel, I use my phone a lot more than when I'm at home. So, whether it's for, calling an Uber, or, the airline applications on my phone, or watching a movie or a show on my phone while I'm on the plane to, kill a little bit of time or whatever. Right. But I can usually tell, again, what I was doing that week based on what my screen time was. So I think those are really interesting, but it's just that little notification, it pops up. You can kind of ignore it if you want, but I think it's pretty interesting based on, looking at how much time I've spent on specific
And it draws you
applications.
into the product, or in this case, a
There you
feature
go.
that Apple deployed. And that's a big one. We've done so many conversations on push notifications, mobile notifications. It's a big it's a big talking point because it draws you into the app. I just
Mm-hmm.
pulled up my screen time, by the way, Gabe, and I've been working today, so like my screen time was like 8 minutes on Instagram. So it's nothing exciting here, but typically it's always like top music apps, top social apps.
Mm,
Like, so I just scrolled back to a couple days ago, a weekend. Safari was number one, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, X, Twitter, Reddit, things like that. But it's again, it's Apple. They've launched this feature that hopefully people use. I think it's a good feature, but
mm-hmm.
um, what
Yeah,
better way to draw them into it than a push notification?
unless you're like Zach and you just don't want to be like shame yourself with how much time you're spending on your phone, then it's a great feature.
Well, it's funny because this was a talking point I was going to bring up later, but I'm gonna bring it up now. And there's a statistic that was released, and it shows that users average 2 hours and 19 minutes a day across 7 different social media platforms. And
Mm-hmm.
the question I wanted to present with that is, well, are you as a BSP, or are you as a company on the right platforms? Because if you think of like the 7 social apps, I think people always default to, oh, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat. You can kind of go down the list. But then there's things like Blue Sky, right? There's Threads that we talked about quite a bit, Gabe.
Mm-hmm.
And again, knowing that users are averaging, I can't remember if it's like 15% of their lives, on social media, on these 7 social media platforms. Uh, where are you spending your time, and where are you putting your marketing dollars?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point. And having that high level understanding of where those folks are and where your right target market is too. I was looking at some data for a customer earlier today, and one of the things that really jumped out to me as I was looking at it was that this particular area that they were going into skewed quite a bit younger than other areas that we look at. And that's a situation where really doubling down on your social media efforts, especially on things like Instagram, which tend to skew a little bit younger than Facebook, as an example, in the kind of meta properties, as we're talking, talking about those specifically, is a recommendation that I'm making to this customer, because they can likely make their dollars go a lot farther advertising on Instagram and actually get people looking versus on Facebook, or potentially higher cost tactics like direct mail and things like that. They've got this target group of people that skew young. Hey, let's make sure that we're hitting them on the platforms they're actually using.
And it's funny you bring that up because about a year ago, we talked about the differences in how different generations consume content or consume
Mm-hmm.
ads. And one of the things that I think Gabe and I will have to do an episode on later this year is the rise of Gen Alpha. They will be buying your services soon. And I don't know if I want to like put a label on Gen Alpha, Gabe, because that might, date some people here. But these are people who were born in 2010. So it seems like just a couple years ago, they will be the next generation to buy your products and services. So, Gabe, we'll have to do a whole episode on this and kind of revisit that conversation. But 7 social media platforms in this example, everyone's going to be interacting with you differently. And Gabe, we've seen that. One of the recommendations we always make is within your Facebook ads or your Meta ads, using that pivot table functionality in the ads reporting to bring in some of the demographics of how people are engaging with your ads. Gabe, I shared some examples with you a couple weeks ago, and like the results were just fascinating to me to
Mm-hmm.
see, who on Facebook is interacting with you as a BSP. It might be what you expect, it might not be what you expect, but I think there's some very powerful data there that can
No
drive your
question.
decision making, especially as we move into the new year and have that data driven approach.
Yes. Oh, look at you transition so nicely into that data-driven approach. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about some really specific suggestions that Zach and I have around how to use data in a data-driven approach to drive your business forward this year. So my first one is review all of your existing subscribers and make sure that they are right sized into the most appropriate service tier. I have this conversation all the time with BSPs, but I'm going to reiterate this again. If you're a subscriber who signed up for service 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever, think about how things have changed in your own life over that time frame. Like, I now work from home. I didn't work from home 4 years ago. I now have kids that are older. We just bought my son a gaming system for Christmas. I'm subscribed to probably 3 more streaming services than I was, 4 years ago, right? So all of these things are happening in my life. More connected devices, changing how I actually work on a day-to-day basis, changing how I entertain myself with the different streaming services that I've subscribed to. So my needs have changed dramatically over that time frame. If you think about all of your subscribers and what they signed up for 3 or 4 years ago, it may be completely out of line and not appropriate for what their needs are as of today. And if you're not segmenting those customers based on maybe sign up date of when they signed up initially, or in a worst case scenario, in a best case scenario, segmenting them based on how they're actually using their broadband service and some of those other things. But at the very least, I would be segmenting my customers. Hey, here's everybody that signed up more than 3 years ago. I need to go back and I need to make sure that they're on the right service. And I need to let them know about the new services that I've launched over that time frame.
Gabe, I think of myself.
Man, I got fired up on that one, Zach, but it's just like, it's one that really, I think there's so much opportunity there.
I think of myself in an example. A few years ago, what was I using the internet for? Uploading documents for my college classes, right? Like that was how I was using my internet. Now, I want to talk about Wi-Fi 7 and the experience here in a bit, but
yes.
Now Xbox cloud gaming, things like this, these are things I wasn't doing, 3 years ago. Back in my day, you would, plug in your Xbox and download a game and play it, right? Now it's on Xbox cloud. I can stream this directly to my home, and perhaps I can prioritize that traffic to make sure that, I get the bandwidth I need. But I think, I really don't want to dive into the Wi-Fi 7 example yet. So I'm going to pause on that and then we'll circle back to that.
Yeah, we'll circle back to Wi-Fi 7 because I definitely am excited about talking about that one too. But I think just to close off on this point, broadband service providers think a lot about the technology changes that happen broadly. Like you were talking about gaming moving from downloads to cloud-based gaming.
Mm-hmm.
I think people, wrap their minds around that. What they often don't think about is what are the changes that are happening in their subscribers' lives that change the way that they're interacting with the service that they're buying. That's where I think that opportunity lies, to be able to say, okay, I know that their life is different now than it was back then. And I want to make sure that they're right-sized around the most appropriate service.
Exactly. I'm working from home now too, Gabe. So, having that experience where I can prioritize my work from home traffic and make sure I've got everything I need to do that. We use the family example so much too. If you're a family, Gabe, you have kids at home and you have the ability to protect them and have all of the managed services that your household needs compared to maybe my household. I think that experience is huge.
Well, and that sort of brings us to our next example here too, which is what new service, if you're a broadband service provider and you've launched some sort of new service in the last 12 months, you look back in 2024, you launched a new service in market. Hopefully you had some level of success with it. And you want to know, who are those? What I would really recommend is looking at the customers who bought that product, who signed up for that service, and what similarities do they have? And can I go build a lookalike model using Meta Ads Manager or something like that to say, all right, I've got 500 people that signed up for this service. Great, that's awesome. Now let me go, actually target a bunch of lookalike folks who seem like they would benefit from this type of service as well. Parental controls is a great example, but it could be any type of service, right? A security camera service or anything else, right?
Gaming, you name it.
Yes, gaming prioritization, right? What are the things that I've launched in the last 12 months? Can I take the customers that have actually signed up for that? Maybe the people who signed up for that are in higher end service tiers. And so I can use that as a way to, target folks as well to bring them into my higher end tiers. But there's a bunch of different things that you can do here to analyze the data, really get a good understanding of who the customers are that bought that service, and then use something like Meta Ads Manager to go build lookalike models to target people for that new service.
I mean, think about the outdoor Wi-Fi use case as well, Gabe. If you
It's
have
another
someone
great one.
buying outdoor Wi-Fi, maybe in a rural ag community, things like that, going out finding people who match that definition that you've created is powerful too. I mean, there's even a business use case there with your business subscribers. So I think the lookalike modeling is fantastic. And again, where does that data come from? It comes from the data that you know about your existing customers. So you can segment this however you like to create really just a segment of your best customers for a specific use case.
Yep. And I know people sometimes get freaked out about, well, I'm uploading my customer data into Meta. And I don't need to get into like the really nitty gritty details of this, but all of that data is hashed to in a way where it's completely, completely, all of the customer PII information basically is completely removed, right? So, people sometimes get freaked out about, doing those types of campaigns. It's something that, not a lawyer, right? But, talk to your team and make sure that you're comfortable using that. But it's such a great opportunity to leverage the information that you know about your existing customers to go find people who look like your best customers.
And we haven't even talked about one of my favorite parts of this conversation, which is the Meta Pixel, getting that on your
Yes.
website to build some of these audiences based on how people interact with your website. Again, we've done an episode on that. I'm sure we'll have a deeper dive in the future, but again, it just goes back to creating the audiences based on the data, based how people interact with your products and services. In this case, your website, your digital social presence, and targeting those people again based on the data.
Well, and now we have reached, I think, the part of the podcast that Zach is most excited about.
Oh man. Well, now I don't want to talk about it, so we may as well just end here.
All right.
But
Oh, come on, it's gonna be fun. So this is a bit niche, and I would say we're very much leaning into the broadband specific topics today on the podcast, which I think that's where the majority of our listenership is. So we want to really lean into that bit of it. But when we think about broadband service, internet is Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi is the internet as far as your customers are concerned. And Zach, I know you've had a really interesting experience with Wi-Fi lately and specifically upgrading to Wi-Fi 7. So I'd be very interested to hear about your experience upgrading to Wi-Fi 7 and what that's meant for your overall internet experience. Since again, Wi-Fi is the internet and internet is Wi-Fi.
well, it's funny, Gabe. So, like I mentioned, I'll be posting on LinkedIn about this here this week as well. But for the past few months, I have been testing the latest and greatest, Wi-Fi 7 systems here that we create. And I had the realization this week that yeah, Wi-Fi 7's cool, but think about the experience within the home or the experience that system provides. And for me, in an MDU situation, yes, it absolutely cuts through the noise of all these Wi-Fi systems around me, right? But Gabe, I'm a big numbers guy, so one of the things I told you over the past few weeks was I forgot what speed tier I even subscribed to, because at the end of the day, especially when you get into these multi-gig scenarios, I mentioned that I have 11 broadband service providers I can choose from. At the end of the day, what's the experience like within the home? And I've done things from like prioritizing gaming traffic to extending the Wi-Fi outside, right? That's one that I just love because your neighbors get jealous about that one. and it's been great. I've got a multi-gig service, so I know that's great. But again, it just goes so much further than speed. It's the experience within the home. Gabe, you and I, if we both had Wi-Fi 7 systems, would have very different use cases, because you could use the Wi-Fi 7 system to maybe do a little less gaming prioritization. But again, your families, controlling the content, restricting content, the blocked web threats, intrusions, and viruses, that's been huge as well. But it's for the past week, I've really gone back to, okay, well, I've been such a numbers guy in the past. What's this new experience like now? So when I did the math, what I did is I plugged my brand new GigaSpire 7 in, and then I also tested my old Wi-Fi system out. And what I found was, if you're looking at speed itself, it was about like 155% increase in Wi-Fi performance, and that was huge. But that's not because of the service tier changing or the speed tier changing.
Right.
That's because I replaced a 10-year-old Wi-Fi system that no one was saying anything about. I've got the fastest speeds in my market, but I was using Wi-Fi routers from 10 years ago, and my BSP could not have cared less. Evidently, I was not going to get those speeds or have that experience from this equipment that came out 10 years ago. Gabe, the example I gave you today was, would you want to walk around with an iPhone 5 in 2025? No, nobody's going to want to do that. I mean,
No.
if you think about what the iPhone was 10 years ago versus what the iPhone is today. I mean, we've got Apple Intelligence today, number one, but Gabe, I sent you the YouTube video of like the photos just the camera of like the 2014 Wi-Fi 5 iPhone and the, 2025 iPhone 16. And it's just a huge difference. And the same, we're talking about iPhones, but the same applies to the technology in your consumer's home. Yes, this Wi-Fi 7 Gig Aspire has the latest and greatest Wi-Fi 7 technology, but it also is capable of building that in-home experience that the equipment from 2014 was not able to do.
No, it's woefully inadequate when it comes to where we're at and where we're going moving forward. I think that's another big thing about this too is I'm seeing situations where broadband service providers are launching. A lot of them are launching multi-gig services, but if you're not launching a high quality Wi-Fi experience with your multi-gig service tiers, what are we doing here, right? Like again, internet is Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi is the internet as far as your customers are concerned. So if you have customers that are buying one of your higher end service tiers, not even multi-gig, maybe just even 500 meg or a gig, and they're on old Wi-Fi technology, it's a great opportunity for you to segment those subscribers out, go run some targeted marketing campaigns at them, hopefully monetize that upgrade. By no means am I saying you have to give it away for free. I think there's a great opportunity there to monetize, especially when we're talking about Wi-Fi 7. Zach, I was telling you the story about my neighbor who just went out and he spent hundreds of dollars on a Wi-Fi 7 system, and I've been giving him a hard time because the one that he bought has some potential security issues that have been talked about a lot in the news lately. And I was like, hey, bud, you might want to send this one back and get one that's not going to get hacked. But regardless, even with some of the challenges of that particular system, he spent hundreds of dollars on this, on these systems for his home to get the latest and greatest Wi-Fi 7 technology. So it's a great opportunity to monetize. It's a great opportunity to upgrade, but to Zach's point, you can improve and deliver a much better experience to your customers, especially those that are on your higher end tiers, where broadband pipe is not necessarily going to be the problem. The Wi-Fi is really where the experience is going to end up being significantly better.
And it goes back to a comment you made at the beginning of the podcast, Gabe. I'm trying to find the exact statistic here around the brand educating them, where people.
Oh, I think it was like 68% will want.
Yeah,
if you're educating them, they're going to trust you more.
Right into this. I mean, we don't want to bother our customers. We don't want to talk to them. Okay, well, so in my example, I was getting a third of the speeds that I should have been getting, and again, my broadband provider just didn't communicate to me at any point that my equipment was out of date. And of course, I knew it was out of date, but having the home lab and the latest equipment.
Well, that, right? Because you're a weirdo and you're into this stuff,
that's just
like I am, right?
It's
the average consumer is not.
Exactly. And that's kind of the final point here is, as I mentioned, being the technical person I am, I recognized what I was doing in my testing. But if you think about, the house down the street or your neighbor buying Wi-Fi 7, Gabe, does your neighbor have Wi-Fi 7 devices? I feel like that's another question we should be asking.
He just bought a new Google phone, and I think it has Wi-Fi 7. I think.
Oh, it's got that 6 gigahertz radio there. Okay, so that's the other thing.
But that's probably the only device he has that actually has the capability of, taking advantage of the new technology.
I had to check. I even checked my Xbox, which does not. And I was like, well, this is, but I go back to when Wi-Fi 7 was first announced, there was this big push of like, oh, I got to get Wi-Fi 7 in my house. And it was, well, why? You don't have any compatible devices. And now we're at a point where, more and more have that compatibility. But again, going back to the experience, you got to have that experience within the home.
But even without the specific devices that are connecting, it still sounds like you got a coverage bump an increase in speed and an increase in coverage for the devices that are connecting to it.
It's actually funny when I go down to my parking garage. I'm still connected to Wi-Fi in this concrete room. Across.
It's probably like the worst thing for Wi-Fi possible.
I know. Well, I told you, the outdoor Wi-Fi too, and of course this is a different Wi-Fi technology, but even having that outside, and it's snowing, so I'm not using it today. But I told you this summer that the neighbors were getting jealous of being able to take this experience outside of the home, especially with all the IoT devices. I'm a big fan of the Rachio Wi-Fi sprinkler controllers. You probably don't have your Rachio in the middle of your house where the Wi-Fi signal's good. Or if you have any outdoor cameras, you probably don't have them, or you probably don't want to have them where only the Wi-Fi is good. You want to be able to have that flexibility. And that's what these new Wi-Fi systems are delivering, the capability to do just that. So again, looking at this decade-old equipment in your subscribers' homes, they may be having a bad experience, and you likely have the data that validates that. Mm-hmm. And I think we can, again, 2025, we can action that data and improve their experience, and then continue to educate them on what they're paying for. I've always said you don't want to be a transaction. You don't want to have a transactional relationship with your customers. What better way to do that than to improve the Wi-Fi experience in their home and to collaborate with your customers?
I love it. I got to tell this story really quick. So you were talking about outdoor and Wi-Fi 7. So he's somewhat recently upgraded to these Wi-Fi 7 systems. And one thing we did to kind of test these out is over the last couple of weeks, as we've been on holiday break, we've watched outdoor movies. So a couple of times we've gone over there, we've taken the kids and we watched like The Grinch, we watched Elf. So we were hanging out in his backyard because it's California. And
it's 16 degrees where I'm at, Gabe. What are you doing watching movies outside?
Well, in California, it's like 50 degrees at night. So we're, maybe in the high 40s. He's got heaters. So, if it got cold, we could turn those on and bundle up, right? So we're hanging out outside and watching movies on this nice big projection screen that he's got set up in his backyard, which is pretty sweet. So, hey, taking the Wi-Fi outdoors with his new fancy Wi-Fi 7 system so we could get it connected and watch and stream some content for the kids.
What's the real estate market like in your area, Gabe? This sounds like a fun neighbor.
Yeah, actually, he's the best neighbor.
I hope he listens to this podcast because
he actually does sometimes. He doesn't listen all the time, so I'm going to have to tell him to listen to this episode. He's the best. I had an electrical problem yesterday and I texted him. I was like, hey, I'm having this issue. Do you have some time tomorrow to check it out? And he's like, absolutely. I love electrical problems. I'll be over whenever you need. So he is the best neighbor. Good guy to hang out with and just a good friend.
That's awesome, Gabe. Well, that does bring us to the end of the podcast. So again, I think we had a great conversation here, not quite making New Year's resolutions, but making some, do we say bold recommendations for things to start doing in 2025?
I like it. Bold. Going back to that word again. Oh, it's
all right.
Again, I'll sort of reiterate all of these things that we talked about really quick, Zach. So, if we think about the things that you can do to really make an impact, analyzing the data for your existing customers, making sure that they're right sized in the appropriate tier. What new services have you launched and how can you find more people that would like those new services? Talking about Wi-Fi 7, really thinking about, what it is that you can do there to improve the overall experience for your customers, whether it be with outdoor, as Zach was talking about, or Wi-Fi 7. And then, the one that we didn't talk about quite as much, but just to kind of reiterate this, what ads were successful in 2024? What are the things that you did in 2024 that were really successful? What are those goals that you set out for yourself, and how can you improve on those, or maybe even run those things back in 2025? I think if people spent some time focusing on those handful of things, probably going to have a pretty good year.
Don't knock on wood or something here, Gabe. You can't just say you're going to have a pretty good year. Okay. But right, no, I'm an optimist, Gabe. So I agree with you. We're going to seriously leverage that data, and what better advice to take from Gabe than to leverage your data? So thank you everyone for tuning into this week's episode of Buffering. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give us a follow on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget, for even more insights, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.